The really good marketers understand that their own perspective is irrelevant because you are not your target group.
You can't guess what your customers want, so stop trying. Today we're talking to Julia Kinner, market researcher and strategist.
It's just this huge competitive advantage that consumer insights bring you that is massively underleveraged, and people don't understand it. It allows you to understand your growth barriers. This is something that you will never ever get from a readily available report.
In this episode, she shares why businesses miss out on true audience connection, breaks down her customer-backed strategy, and teaches you to harness the power of tailored research.
For me, that is very often the starting point, building your strategy around.
I have been so enjoying your content, and I've been reading your LinkedIn posts for the last 6 months or so, and I find myself, half a world away going, yes, this is the right thing to be saying, yes, and it's the same challenge. Tell me a little bit about the company and the job you have now and why you do what you do.
So I'm a marketing consultant. I have my own boutique marketing consulting firm, which is called JK and Associate. And basically, we focus on growth, strategy, and execution for digital products and services. Why digital products and services? Because I come out of telecommunications. I started my career in consumer research. Then I changed to telecommunications. So everything that is digital products and services is my world. I have always tremendously enjoyed to work with tech companies because of their very specific challenges. And yeah, I was kind of fed up with the corporate marketing world.
I can't imagine you surviving inside a big corporate telecom.
Exactly.
Given what you do. You must have been told no every day.
Yes, and that's the problem. It's really difficult because you want to do the right things, but then you just get shot down. And I was really thinking, so what am I supposed to do here? I know with what is expected, I cannot move the needle, which I want to do. And so I was like, no, I have to do something different. And yeah, my objective is really to help businesses first get marketing right, really understand what needs to be done, what is marketing, what are all the levers that you can pull, and what are just the things that are completely wrong that, don't help you grow, but lead to the exact opposite.
And that should be so easy, shouldn't it? I mean, it's so easy.
Yes,
Let me teach you a new tool that will grow your business. Sounds like such an easy objective, and it's anything but, as you know. What is it about business leaders that makes them so insistent on relying on their gut instead of being excited about getting third-party validation on the insights? I have spent 30 years trying to get people to understand that the feeling that they have when they get that new insight is like that moment of inspiration where you go, there's a new path forward. There's a new way to do this. I've been doing it off or wrong, or here's how I can hit the mark so much better. Why is it so hard for people to get? Why is that struggle so real?
That's a very good question. I think part of it is it's a bit of arrogance that you think you know better. You are a marketer. You have to know. But at the end of the day, I think the really good marketers understand that they know nothing. Yeah, that they really need to learn about their consumers and their marketers, their market, and that their own perspective is at the end of the day irrelevant because you are not your target group. And that's it.
It's such a simple premise. I think
yes.
I have watched company after company stand in a room and declare that they want growth. And then you tell them, here's how you can get it. And they say, "What? But that won't work." That's like telling your dentist how to drill your tooth. Like it does. Like if I sit down in the dentist chair, I surrender to the fact that I know nothing about dentistry. But for whatever reason, in marketing, everyone's an expert. Every business owner is a 100% expert. one of these days I'll figure out what the psych tool is, or perhaps AI can help us answer this age-old question of if AI can help move the needle towards solving cancer, perhaps it can answer the question of why perception is so strongly rooted in, I know my customer. What people don't seem to understand is your customer feedback is limited by two very real things. The first one is whatever ability they have to articulate what they feel. And the second is their willingness to articulate what they feel. If you're standing in front of a company that's working with you, you don't want to offend them. You don't want to tell them, oh, well, here's the thing. You've got bad breath and you never wear the right clothes. And you don't want to tell them that. So what you're going to say is not right now. Or, we've had to do some cutback. You'll tell them anything else but the truth. Third party is the only way to get them to open that veil. I find it amazing that businesses don't do more to get to that place. Tell me a little bit about the process. How do you begin that journey of trust with your clients to get them to say, okay, Julia's going to go find something that we don't know about this thing that we think we know so very well?
Yes. We typically start our projects with an internal analysis. And this is where clients have mostly the first aha moment. Because if you drill down the data and you look at it from an external perspective, then first you can make them understand that you understand their business. And second, they will realize that by the time you did your analysis, you understand their business most likely better than they do. And this is where it somehow starts. So it's the internal analysis and looking at the data that they have from maybe a slightly different perspective than they are used to do. Because you have your internal dashboards where you have all your KPIs. And what I see very often that businesses, they don't look left, right, and it just focus on their boards. Yes. And there are a lot of things they don't look at. But if you put things a little bit upside down, you discover some things. If you put the pieces together, which very often is not the case because you have different departments looking at different parts of their data, but a person that comes in and connects all of those things and makes sense of it, also from a customer perspective, that is typically very insightful.
So you talk about this in terms of customer-backed strategy.
Yes.
Is that the process of aligning the target audience or the consumer's insights with what the business goals are?
Yes, more or less. So, what does consumer back mean? It's a bit of a cryptic term. Basically, it means that your entire strategy is rooted in consumer insights and in what's going on in your market. So you don't start within your organization and say, hey, what we want to do, etc. But you really start in the market. You start with your consumers. You start with consumer need. You quantify the value behind different segments. And this is what we call consumer-backed strategy, which basically just means the consumer and consumer needs and the value behind is at the center of our strategies.
Can you tell me an example or give me an example of when you found a consumer insight that really turned a company's whole direction around?
I cannot talk about any of my cases, but I can give you a very famous example. If you look at Dropbox, for example, they started very, very heavily with paid ads, and it wasn't profitable for them because they had a consumer acquisition cost of $300 and a CLTV of maybe 100. And then they realized, just by looking at their internal processes, that their referral program is completely underleveraged, that consumers who get referred stay longer and more likely to convert. And so they have somehow shifted their entire growth strategy based on one simple insight. And I think it's a brilliant example that really digging on your internal data, understand what your consumer is going through, how that all relates to value is the best unlock to, adjust your growth strategy and focus on the things that bring you most value. And that's not necessarily paid ads, which I think is, there are so many businesses that heavily rely on paid ads, if that is, I don't know, on Meta or on TikTok, etc. And it might work for some, but I think a lot of businesses see that the acquisition cost they see in those channels is just, it's always increasing. And so you have to find different ways to acquire customers. And of course, it's more complex than that, but yes.
I think that's one of the things that always surprises me is how there seems to be this very linear perception of research as just consumer data in terms of opinion, but it actually expands quite broadly beyond that into their behaviors. Where do they consume media? How do they find information out about a potential solution? Where do they go to collect the information that they need before making a decision? All of that winds up coming back as a benefit in an efficiency play for these businesses. So if they're spending a tremendous amount of money, as you're saying, throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to figure out, okay, I'm spending $1 million on media, but I really don't understand why some things work and some things don't. It could very easily be that they're in the wrong place altogether, or they're saying the wrong message. And those have direct impact, not just on understanding the audience, but in the development of messaging and the approach to media. I find it profound that this isn't talked about more in MBA programs or in business courses. They talk about operations, they talk about manufacturing, they talk about pricing, they talk about anything but the person who's supposed to buy from them. Do you find that to be the case there as well?
Yes, absolutely. If I think about the average knowledge that a business has about their consumers, it's most likely something, it's men and women, and they are between 18 and 65 years old. But most businesses don't bother to understand their consumers better. And that, you mentioned the communication elements of that. So where do they get their information, etc. But it even starts much earlier. If I think about, for example, what is the consumer job to be done? You have a product and service or whatever, and there is most likely some consumer job that is linked to that. But what is that really? And that, for me, that is very often the starting point of building your strategy around really what is it that your consumer needs to get accomplished. And then you start building much more holistic systems around your product or your service, which makes you more interesting for your consumers, because most likely if you do that, you offer something, you deliver something that your competitors don't do, because they don't bother understanding their consumers. So for me, it's just this huge competitive advantage that consumer insights bring you that is massively underleveraged, and people don't understand it. They're just happy throwing out their ads and they don't care about the rest.
I think it's interesting that people don't recognize. We're in the middle of recording our education series that we're about to launch. And one of the big concepts that I share in this is no one will do this, right? Like businesses don't, like one half of the advantage is having the unique message and putting it into motion. But the other half is that your competition won't fight you. They won't take the time to define their own position. Like half the advantage is just doing it at all, because it puts you so much higher than everybody else that's saying, well, that worked for those guys, so we should do it too. And they follow each other like little soldiers down the row, right? And it's like, well, if it worked for Bobby, then it must work for us. And that's as far as the thinking goes. And it's really fun. Like you're talking about the pivot from demographics to psychographics, right? Like why would anybody care, as opposed to who it is that's bought in the past?
Yes.
And I always find it interesting. I'll go to a meeting with someone who doesn't do this, who's wearing a Rolex, driving a BMW, wearing, whoever's shoes. And they say, well, brand doesn't matter. And I'm like, you're literally sitting in front of me, proving the point the other direction. Like you realize that when you look at your Rolex or your Amiga or whatever, you're literally proving you wrong. You know
Yes.
this, right? And like, they're like, well, that's just,
What's
like
the answer on that?
they'll justify it any way possible as long as it doesn't come back to, you're right. I also think, and, you speak to this on your website, that there's a perception that this takes a ton of time and a ton of money. What's the reality of finding meaningful consumer insights?
The reality in terms of time and pricing?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a couple of months.
It's 100% affordable. I mean,
Yeah.
if you have a business that is that is making some money, then, I mean, if we talk concrete terms, it's maybe 8 to 12 weeks that we take on our projects. And then, I mean, it depends how big or how many segments you have, but maybe you spend a 20K on market research.
Right. That's the thing. It's not like some, $250,000 investment that you have to make. And
No.
I imagine that you probably have had similar experiences, and I'm not being rude to Gartner or Forrester, but I read these research things that these people pay these money for, and I'm like,
Yes.
not useful, not useful, not useful, and they'll pay $150,000, $200,000 for these documents that aren't worth the paper they're printed on, instead of going out and getting qualitative and quantitative information that will actually help their business. Like, do they think that any research, like all research, is the same? Is that kind of the structure? It's like, well, if I paid for this Forrester research,
Yes.
it's, nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM, right? Like it's a big established company. They must know what they're doing over there. They must know what the answer is. But how is that relevant to their business in terms of creating something that's unique? I can't figure out where that synapse fires.
Yeah, I mean, most likely it's just a perception. Okay, we have some consumer insights. Consumer insights is consumer insights. It doesn't matter if it is specifically for our case and tailored to the specific questions that we want to answer in a given point in time. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's just, it's really readily available. You don't have the hassle because you can just go there. You have your credit card.
Right.
Please
You swipe.
charge me 100K and then I have my report.
And you've got your report.
I mean, I think those reports are a good starting point if they are well done, because they provide you with some sort of information about your category in general, which is not a bad thing. You understand the category, but it will not enable you to use that report, those insights, to really build a strategy that is fit for purpose for your status quo as a business.
Sure. I mean, because it's not about your business. It's just about the industry, the category, and general information about what is the current status quo as opposed to what can be done about it. So I would agree with you. I tend to find that the most interesting information in those documents is usually buried on page 6 or 8. And it's, it's after all the stuff that everybody reads on the first couple pages and then tosses away. It's some little hidden insight that's, some little nugget that is just so tiny it's almost an afterthought, and you have to kind of dig for those insights to be able to really pivot on something.
But maybe that's the perfect platform here to talk a bit about the advantages of tailored market research, because I think the most interesting and relevant thing is that it allows you to understand your growth barriers. So you are able to understand what is it that currently is a bottleneck to our growth, and then what are the actions that we need to take in order to resolve those bottlenecks. And this is something that you will never ever get from a readily available report, because it doesn't contain data about your awareness, about your consideration, about the preferences in the market, about the barriers that consumers have and how you can overcome them. So a tailored market research is something that enables you to improve your strategy and also to understand where do you have the biggest levers. Is it awareness for us? Is it consideration for us, or whatsoever? And then you can take those insights and actually create a marketing strategy that helps you to resolve all those bottlenecks that you discovered.
What do you think is going to happen to businesses as AI comes into their world and they perceive that every answer is just the result of a prompt? What are you seeing now, and what do you predict is coming as people and business owners learn the true value and use for AI in their businesses?
I mean, I think it can be incredibly useful for some things, just to automate things, processes, etc. Also in marketing, if I think about all the opportunities that it opens, for example, for videos that are on brand, for communication that is on brand, I think it's just brilliant, because you can, for example, take your brand guidelines, feed that into an AI machine, and you will always very, very consistently produce assets that just fit your brand. So I think it definitely has advantages, and I love that. If we talk about creating marketing strategies with AI, I'm much more skeptical, because the big drawback is that you will build your strategy on generic insights. And then what do you want to do with it? I mean, you end up being like all the other 100 businesses that also did their AI-based strategy and got the same information on them, on their prompts, and you will just...
I think like any other tool, I remember when Macintosh first came along and people were thinking, this is the game changer. Like, you don't have to draw anything anymore. You don't have to do marker comps anymore. Like, now you can put typography into a machine and it like lets you move it around and you don't have to, worry with all the details. But ultimately it found its place. Like everybody ultimately had the same advantage, and thus it wasn't an advantage anymore. It was just how the industry moved forward. I think AI has the allure of giving people an advantage that isn't really going to be there. And I don't think people understand yet that everyone at every company is feeding the same information in and asking for an answer back. And AI is going to reach for the common denominator. Now, will it reach for an efficient common denominator as it can find? Yes, it's going to say, okay, where I see the greatest use case or case study of success was under these circumstances, these ways. And so here's the answer that I would give you. But once it's given that to every single business,
yes,
they have to eventually understand that they're going to very quickly and more efficiently and more quickly than has ever been done in history arrive right back at status quo. So
yes,
the perception of advantage is far greater than the advantage itself. And ultimately, they're just going to erode their own. And I think about it like a toll road. When a new lane opens up, for the first 3 or 4 cars that get in line, it's an advantage. And then everybody equals back out again. And that's not just what's happening here, but it's happening much, much faster than has ever happened. Typically, advantage is something that, the early adopters get an advantage, and then the second, the mass gets into it, and then the laggards ultimately come along. But in this case, adoption is going to be so fast, I don't think that they're actually going to see the advantage. I'm not convinced that they'll see the advantage at all.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to look at it. So it's maybe an advantage at the moment, but I think one thing you must not forget is that marketing is much more about effectiveness and not so much about efficiency. Because if you do the wrong things, yes, you can make them more efficient, but they're still the wrong things. And consumer insights work much more on the effectiveness side of things, because they really enable you to do the right things. And once you know what are the right things, okay, feel free to make it more efficient, but first just make sure you're...
Oh, I love that, because it's so true. Businesses look for efficiency. I find the same thing in media buy and the addiction to ROAS as opposed to ROI. Business leaders would rather buy a banner ad that has a 1 in 1,000 click-through rate than they would to buy direct mail, which you can get 1 to 3% return on. Now, that's 1,000 to 3,000 times better. And yet, because I can track this and I can't track that, I would rather use this, even though it's much less. I think if they truly understood just how much less return they were getting, which is why everybody talks about it in terms of like, we're up 0.03%. Who cares about a percent of a percent? Like, that's not, you're not getting anywhere. That's not traction. Where are you going? But the perception is, but I can track it. And because I can track it, I feel safe. And I think that's the big thing that...
Yes. And marketing is, at the end of the day, it's a dangerous...
Yes, yeah. Tracking and efficiency for efficiency's sake is absolutely a cul-de-sac that's going nowhere. Let me shift gears for a minute. You've been so successful in social media, just bringing your message to the platform. This is one of those things that I see so many people asking me about. You know, we had some really good success on TikTok and LinkedIn. Those are really the two platforms that we had focused on up until this year. What made you go to these platforms, and how are you successful on them? And what suggestions would you make to people who want to try to mirror some of that kind of visibility and success?
Well, I basically started on LinkedIn because, of course, I wanted to acquire clients for my business. I realized very quickly that if you focus on high quality content that really delivers value, then people do appreciate it. And especially, if you look at LinkedIn, there is so much trash that is posted there every day. And I think it's a lot about, just putting out high quality content that, maybe just helps people to learn something. And then people come back, people engage, people ask, send you messages. It's,
It's kind of amazing. There seems to be this mystique about going online as though it's harder than it is. And it's not to say that content development is easy, because it's not. It requires a tremendous amount of thinking time. And I think you had made a post early on about people taking the content that you create and reposting it as their own, which does. It's infuriating, and people do it all the time, which is enough to drive you nuts. But the content that you put out there really is about sharing what you know. It's not about a cute little meme or how many thumbs up you get. That's not the point. The point is, each one of these social media channels is a learning platform. And when people go on, the people who are serious in terms of their business or their development or the forward progress of their company or their personal goals, they're there looking for one little piece to the puzzle. And the more that you put out that shares your perspective, we all need to hear it the way that we need to hear it, right? My wife and I are famous for saying to each other, I told you that 6 months ago, right? But you have to hear it the way that you need to hear it. And I think that's the benefit of social media, is that you're sharing something the way you happen to perceive it. And if somebody else hears it and actually it connects for them for the first time, that's a win for them. And they'll credit you with the fact that the content that you created was what helped them get there. I kind of find that that's really the strategy, right? Is let me share what I know in the hopes that somebody comes along and sees it and says, oh, that was really helpful. Thanks. I find that winds up being the joy of it, if you will.
Yes. It's really, as you said, it's putting out the things that you learn along the way. And then, it resonates with people. It's not more complicated than that.
Here's the playbook. Talk about things you know and talk about it genuinely. Here ends the lesson, right? Very, very short chapter. Julia, thank you so much for finding some time today to connect with me. Are there any last points that you want to share about this subject? And if not, how can people connect with you to learn more about your insights that you're sharing, or to have you help their businesses?
You find me on LinkedIn. My name is Julia Kinner. If there is anything I can do to help for anyone, please just reach out. And
That's perfect. Thank you so very much. I so appreciate your time today. This has been great.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
I look forward to seeing you on LinkedIn.